The sound of shattering glass changed everything in a single heartbeat. One moment, Tasha Williams was refilling a crystal water glass at table 7. The next, she was lying on the polished marble floor of an upscale Manhattan restaurant, her blue and white uniform soaking through with her own blood. 2 bullets had ripped through her body, one lodged in her left shoulder blade, the other tearing through her upper back near her spine. She did not truly know the man seated in the private corner booth. The one in the immaculate black suit with the cold, calculating eyes was Kai Park, one of the most feared Korean crime lords in New York City. She only knew that multiple guns were aimed at his head, and something deeper than thought had seized control of her exhausted body. By the time the NYPD sirens began screaming through the streets of Koreatown, both the Waitress and the Mafia Boss had disappeared into the night. This is not just a love story. This is a tale of sacrifice, of power, and 2 bullets that rewrote destiny itself. Rain in New York City does not wash things clean. It only makes the blood run faster into the gutters. It was 11 o'clock on a Friday night, and Elegance, an upscale Korean fusion restaurant nestled in the heart of Manhattan's Koreatown, was winding down from the dinner rush. The soft amber lighting cast elegant shadows across white tablecloths, while the muted sounds of K-pop drifted from hidden speakers. Tasha Williams cleared table 12 for the 3rd time that evening. Her feet ached inside her worn black flats, the insoles compressed to nothing after endless double shifts. She had been on her feet since 6 o'clock that morning, 18 hours straight. First her breakfast shift at a diner in Harlem, then catering a corporate lunch in Midtown. Now this evening shift that wouldn't end until 2 a.m. Her studio apartment in the Bronx was 3 months behind on rent. Her landlord, Mr. Kowalski, had stopped calling. Now he just taped final notices to her door every 5 days, each one more threatening than the last. But the rent was not what kept Tasha awake at night, staring at her ceiling until dawn. It was the voicemail from Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, still saved on her dying phone. Her 68-year-old grandmother, May Williams, the woman who had raised her after her parents died, needed dialysis 3 times a week and was on a transplant list that could take years. The upfront costs for treatment, medications, and care totaled $180,000. Tasha had $89 in her checking account. She had already sold her car, her laptop, her mother's jewelry, everything of value. She had already called every distant cousin, every church connection, every person who might remember her grandmother's kindness. She had already worked until her bones felt hollow and her vision blurred. And still, it was not enough. It would never be enough. The man in the corner booth, the one who came every Friday night, always requested her section and tipped $200 on a $40 meal, watched her with dark, unreadable eyes. She did not know his name. She did not ask questions. In a place like this, you learned quickly that some customers preferred their privacy, and tips like his paid for her grandmother's medications for an entire week. She had no idea that in less than 4 minutes, she would take 2 bullets meant for him. She had no idea that those 4 minutes would change everything. If this story gripped you with its intensity, hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who craves compelling cross-cultural romance and high-stakes drama, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because this is only the beginning of Tasha's journey into a world where loyalty is paid in blood and love is the most dangerous weapon of all. Tasha Williams had perfected the art of being invisible. In a restaurant like Elegance, where Manhattan's elite dropped more on a single bottle of wine than she made in a week, invisibility was survival. You poured the water before they asked. You cleared the plates without a sound. You smiled politely, never too warm, never too cold, and you certainly never made eye contact longer than necessary. The marble floors were unforgiving on her feet. 9 hours into her shift, and the sharp ache in her lower back had become a constant companion, a dull throb that pulsed with every step. The blue and white uniform that had seemed crisp and professional that morning now clung to her skin, damp with the humidity of the kitchen and the exertion of carrying trays that seemed to grow heavier as the night wore on. Table 7 needed water. Table 12 wanted their check. Table 4 was ready to order dessert. Tasha moved through the motions with mechanical precision, her mind elsewhere. Always elsewhere. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She already knew what it was. Another text from Columbia Presbyterian. Another reminder that her grandmother's next dialysis appointment was in 3 days. Another invoice she couldn't pay. The numbers had stopped meaning anything weeks ago. $180,000 might as well have been $180 million. Both were equally impossible. Her bank account held $89. Her rent was 3 months overdue. Mr. Kowalski's latest eviction notice was still folded in her other pocket, the paper soft from being opened and refolded too many times. The man in the corner booth was watching her again. He came every Friday night at exactly 10:30, always alone, always in a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. Black jacket, crisp white shirt, no tie. His face was angular and severe, his dark eyes tracking everything in the room with a predator's awareness. The other servers refused to take his section. Something about him made them nervous, made them find excuses to trade tables. But Tasha couldn't afford to be nervous. She couldn't afford to turn down a customer who ordered a single glass of whiskey and a small plate of bulgogi, then left $200 in cash on a $40 bill. Every single week. Without fail. She didn't know his name. She didn't ask. In her world, you learned quickly not to question good fortune, no matter how strange it seemed. She refilled his water glass, her hands steady despite the exhaustion seeping into her bones. He nodded once, barely perceptible, his gaze already returning to the window where rain had begun to streak the glass. Tasha turned away, unaware that in less than 20 minutes, she would stop being invisible forever. The front doors exploded inward with a sound like thunder. Glass shattered across the entrance, glittering like diamonds under the amber lights as 3 men stormed through the wreckage. They wore black masks and moved with military precision, their weapons already raised. The maitre d' hit the floor. A woman at table 3 screamed. Chaos erupted in slow motion, every second stretching into an eternity. Tasha's body froze. Her mind went blank. She stood paralyzed near the kitchen entrance, a water pitcher trembling in her hand, as the lead gunman swept the room with cold, calculating eyes. Then his weapon locked onto the corner booth, onto the man in the black suit. Something deeper than thought seized control of her body. "Get down!" The words tore from her throat as her legs launched her forward. She didn't think about the guns. She didn't think about the impossibility of what she was doing. She only knew that death was aimed at another human being, and her exhausted, broken body was moving to intercept it. She hit the man in the suit like a linebacker, driving him backward as the booth table overturned. Her arms wrapped around his shoulders, pulling him down, shielding him with her own flesh. The first bullet struck her left shoulder blade. It felt like being hit with a sledgehammer wrapped in fire, the impact spinning her sideways even as she clung to the stranger beneath her. The second bullet tore through her upper back, just below her right shoulder. The pain was white-hot and absolute, stealing the breath from her lungs and the strength from her limbs. She collapsed onto the marble floor, her blood spreading in a dark pool that reflected the restaurant's amber lighting. Somewhere above her, the man she'd saved was moving. His voice cut through the chaos with icy command, shouting orders in Korean. Gunfire erupted. Short, controlled bursts. The attackers didn't stand a chance. Men in dark suits materialized from nowhere, his security detail, lethal and efficient. Bodies dropped. The screaming intensified, then stopped. Silence fell like a guillotine. Tasha's vision was tunneling, darkness creeping in from the edges. She could feel hands on her, pressing against her wounds, but the sensations were distant, dreamlike. Her phone was buzzing in her apron pocket. Probably another text from the hospital. Probably about her grandmother. She'd never make it to that appointment now. The man in the black suit knelt beside her, his face appearing above hers. His hands were covered in her blood. His dark eyes, usually so cold and unreadable, were wide with something that looked almost like shock. "Stay with me," he commanded, his voice sharp and certain. "Do you hear me? Stay with me." But the darkness was so much warmer than the cold marble floor, and Tasha Williams let it pull her under. Kai Park did not panic. In 20 years of navigating the underworld, he had learned that panic was a luxury that got you killed. But as he pressed his jacket against the waitress's wounds, watching her blood soak through the expensive fabric, something cold and unfamiliar twisted in his chest. She had saved his life. This stranger with tired eyes and worn shoes had thrown herself between him and certain death without hesitation. "We need to move now," he snapped at his head of security, Min-suk. "Get the car. We're going to the facility." "Boss, the hospital is closer." "No hospitals. No police. The facility. Now." He lifted her carefully, her body alarmingly light in his arms, her blue and white uniform completely saturated with blood. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, each breath a small, desperate gasp. He moved through the emergency exit where his armored SUV was already waiting, engine running. The drive to his private medical facility in Queens took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of watching her chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. 12 minutes of his hand pressed against her wounds, trying to slow the bleeding that wouldn't stop. Dr. Han was waiting when they arrived, her surgical team already prepped. They rushed the waitress into the operating room while Kai stood outside, his hands still covered in her blood, watching through the observation window. "I need her alive," he told Dr. Han through the intercom. "Whatever it takes." The surgery took 4 hours. Twice, the monitors flatlined, the shrill alarm cutting through Kai like a blade. Twice, Dr. Han brought her back, shocking her heart into beating again. The second time, it took nearly 3 minutes. 3 minutes where Kai stood motionless, his jaw clenched so tightly his teeth ached, willing this stranger to survive. When Dr. Han finally emerged, exhausted and splattered with blood, she nodded once. "She's stable. Critical, but stable. The next 48 hours are crucial." Kai released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Good. I need everything about her. Full background check. Family, finances, debts, parking tickets, everything." Min-suk appeared an hour later with a manila folder. Kai read it in his office, the words painting a picture of quiet desperation. Tasha Williams, 26 years old. Orphaned at 15, raised by her grandmother. 3 jobs. $89 in her bank account. 3 months behind on rent. Grandmother May Williams, 68, stage 4 kidney disease requiring dialysis 3 times weekly. Treatment costs $180,000. Kai set the folder down and stared at the wall. She had been drowning, barely surviving. And still, she had chosen to save him. He picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first to his accountant. The second to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. Some debts could only be repaid in kind. Tasha woke to the smell of jasmine and the soft weight of Egyptian cotton sheets against her skin. For a moment, she thought she was dead. Heaven couldn't possibly smell this good, and hell wouldn't bother with thread counts this high. Pain lanced through her shoulder as she tried to sit up, sharp and immediate, dragging her back to reality. She gasped, her hand flying to her back where bandages wrapped around her torso like armor. The room swam into focus, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured garden, cream-colored walls adorned with minimalist art, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. This was not her shoebox apartment in the Bronx. The door opened, and an elderly Korean woman entered carrying a tray. She had kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her movements graceful despite her age. "You're awake," she said softly, setting the tray on the nightstand. "I'm Jin-soo. Please don't try to move too quickly. You were badly hurt." "Where?" Tasha's voice came out as a rasp. Where am I? What happened? You're safe. That's what matters. Mr. Park will explain everything. Mr. Park. The name meant nothing to Tasha, but before she could ask, the man himself appeared in the doorway. The man from the restaurant. The one in the corner booth. The one she'd saved. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. You. The restaurant. The men with guns, her eyes widened. My grandmother. Oh God, I was supposed to call her. What day is it? I need my phone. Miss Williams. His voice cut through her panic with surgical precision. Your grandmother is fine. Better than fine, actually. Tasha stared at him, uncomprehending. He moved further into the room, his presence somehow making the spacious bedroom feel smaller. I've taken care of your grandmother's medical expenses. All of them. 6 months of dialysis treatments, fully paid. Her medications covered. The outstanding balance at Columbia Presbyterian cleared. He paused, his dark eyes locked on hers. I've also paid your rent for the next 6 months and settled your other debts. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. That's almost $200,000. Give or take. He said it like it was nothing. Like it was pocket change. Why? The question came out as a whisper. Because you saved my life without hesitation. Without knowing who I was or what I could offer you in return. He stepped closer, and she saw something almost like respect in his expression. I'm Kai Park, and I always repay my debts. You're under my protection now, Miss Williams. No one will touch you. No one will threaten you. And your grandmother will receive the best medical care money can buy. Tasha's throat tightened. I can't accept. You already did. The moment you threw yourself in front of those bullets. His tone left no room for argument. Rest now. We'll talk more when you're stronger. 3 weeks into her recovery, Tasha couldn't sleep. The compound was too quiet, too perfect, the silence pressing against her ears like water. At 2 a.m., she found herself in Kai's massive kitchen, staring at ingredients she hadn't seen in years: real butter, fresh chicken, cream that hadn't been watered down. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. When you can't fix what's broken, baby girl, you feed what's hungry. She started cooking. Fried chicken the way May had taught her, with buttermilk and paprika and cayenne. Mac and cheese from scratch, none of that boxed nonsense, with 3 kinds of cheese and a breadcrumb crust. The familiar motion soothed something raw inside her chest. It's 3 in the morning. She spun around, nearly dropping the whisk. Kai stood in the doorway wearing black silk pajama pants and nothing else, his hair slightly disheveled, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. I couldn't sleep, she said, turning back to the stove. I was going to clean up. I'm sorry if I woke you. You didn't. He moved closer, studying the organized chaos on the counter. What are you making? Comfort food. Southern style. She glanced at him. You hungry? Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor. I haven't eaten home-cooked food in 15 years. They ate at the kitchen island, the compound silent around them. Kai ate slowly, deliberately, like he was trying to memorize the taste. When Tasha asked about his parents, his jaw tightened. My father was murdered when I was 12. Rival gang. They made me watch. He said it without emotion, like he was reciting facts. My mother died of grief 6 months later. Heart attack, the doctors said. I knew better. Car accident, Tasha said quietly. I was 15. Black ice on the highway. I was supposed to be in that car, but I had detention. She pushed her food around her plate. My grandmother says God had other plans. I'm still waiting to find out what they are. Maybe this is it. Kai's eyes met hers. Maybe we're meant to survive so you could save me. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. That night, Tasha dreamed of shattering glass and gunfire. She woke gasping, sweat-soaked and shaking, to find Kai standing in her doorway. He must have heard her scream. It's okay, he said, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. You're safe. I keep seeing them. The men with guns. The blood, her voice broke. Look at me. His hand cupped her face, gentle despite the calluses. You're here. You survived. That takes more courage than most people have in their entire lives. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe they both did. But suddenly his lips were on hers, tentative and questioning, and she was answering with everything she had. The kiss tasted like shared grief and unexpected hope, like two broken people finding something whole in each other. When they pulled apart, Kai rested his forehead against hers. This is dangerous, he whispered. I know, Tasha breathed. I don't care. Minjun arrived at the compound on a Tuesday morning with a smile that never reached his eyes. He was younger than Kai, maybe 35, with sharp features and expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the smell of ambition and resentment. So this is the famous Waitress, he said in Korean, looking Tasha up and down like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. The one who thinks she can play house with our boss. Tasha didn't speak Korean, but tone was universal. She met his gaze without flinching. I'm Tasha Williams. And you are? Minjun. Second in command. He switched to English, his accent precise. I've been with Kai for 12 years. Long before you decided to play hero. The words were polite, but the venom underneath was unmistakable. Kai appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately shifting the temperature in the room. Minjun. I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. I wanted to meet your guest. Minjun's smile widened. She's quite unexpected. After he left, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling of being measured for a coffin. What she didn't see was Minjun's car pulling into a warehouse in Red Hook an hour later. What she didn't hear was his conversation with Zhang Wei, the Red Dragon Triad's leader, a man whose cruelty was legendary even in a world built on violence. Kai's grown soft, Minjun said, leaning against a shipping container. He's distracted. Weak. Now is the time to move. Zhang Wei lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dim warehouse. And what do you get out of this arrangement? His territory in Manhattan and Queens. You get Brooklyn and the waterfront. We split the protection rackets 50-50. Minjun's eyes glittered with calculated greed. But we need leverage. Something to draw him out alone, vulnerable. The girl, Zhang Wei said, smoke curling from his lips. The waitress. Exactly. 2 days later, Tasha visited her grandmother at Columbia Presbyterian. May looked better than she had in months, color returning to her cheeks, her eyes bright and alert. They laughed together, cried together, held each other like they were both still trying to believe this miracle was real. This man, May said carefully. This Kai Park. Is he good to you, baby? Tasha thought about midnight conversations and gentle touches, about someone who saw her when the world had spent years looking through her. Yes, Grandma. He is. The parking garage was poorly lit, fluorescent bulbs flickering against concrete pillars. Tasha was halfway to the car Kai's driver had sent when she heard footsteps behind her. Too many. Too fast. She turned just as the black van screeched to a stop beside her. Hands grabbed her arms, her mouth, lifting her off her feet. She tried to scream, tried to fight, but there were too many of them and they were too strong. The last thing she saw before the hood came down was Minjun's face, smiling that same empty smile. Nothing personal, he said. Just business. Tasha woke with zip ties cutting into her wrists and a splitting headache that pulsed behind her eyes. The room was small and windowless, concrete walls sweating with dampness, a single bulb swinging overhead. Her shoulders screamed from being wrenched behind her back, still healing wounds protesting every movement. Minjun sat across from her in a metal folding chair, looking pleased with himself. You're awake. Good. He pulled out a tablet, swiping the screen until video footage appeared. I want you to see something. The image showed a hospital room. Her grandmother's hospital room. May was asleep in bed, and 4 in her arm, completely unaware of the man standing in the shadows near the door. One of Minjun's men, Tasha realized with cold horror. One phone call, Minjun said conversationally, and she stops breathing. They'll say it was a complication from her condition. These things happen with kidney patients, you understand. You son of a... Please. Save your outrage. He set the tablet down where she could still see it. You're going to do exactly what I say. You're going to stay quiet, stay cooperative, and pray that Kai values your life more than his own survival instinct. He'll kill you for this. Minjun laughed, sharp and bitter. He'll try. But I've spent 12 years watching him build this empire. 12 years in his shadow while he made millions and I collected scraps. He leaned forward, his face inches from hers. Tonight, that changes. Tonight, I take everything he has. Starting with you. He typed a message on his phone, then stood. The old Queensboro warehouse. Midnight. Come alone or she dies. He hit send. Let's see how much the great Kai Park is willing to sacrifice for a waitress. Across the city, Kai stared at the message on his screen. His office fell silent as his men watched their boss transform into something cold and lethal. Mobilize everyone, he said quietly, deadly calm. I want shooters on every rooftop within 3 blocks. I want eyes on every entrance and exit. I want. Boss, his head of security interrupted carefully. The message says come alone. I know what it says. Kai's jaw clenched. But I also know Minjun. He won't honor any deal. This is a trap. Then don't go. Kai looked at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. The image of Tasha, bloody and broken on the restaurant floor, sacrificing herself without hesitation, flashed through his mind. The sound of her laughter in his kitchen. The taste of her kiss. Position everyone outside the perimeter, he ordered. But I go in alone. If anything happens to her because I brought an army, I'll never forgive myself. He checked his weapon, his movements precise and controlled. Minjun wants a war. He's about to get one. At 11:47 p.m., Kai Park walked into the Queensboro warehouse alone, knowing he was probably walking to his death and not caring as long as Tasha walked out alive. The warehouse floor erupted in gunfire the moment Kai stepped into the light. Zhang Wei emerged from behind a shipping container, flanked by 24 armed men, their weapons all trained on Kai. Minjun appeared from the opposite side, his smile triumphant and vicious. Did you really think I'd honor a fair exchange? Minjun laughed. You're losing your edge, boss. Love makes you stupid. Kai's hand moved toward his weapon, but he was outnumbered 12-1. Even he couldn't survive those odds. Kill him, Zhang Wei ordered in Mandarin. The first shot missed Kai by inches as he dove behind a steel pillar. Return fire came from somewhere outside, his men, ignoring orders, unable to watch him die. The warehouse transformed into a war zone, bullets ricocheting off metal and concrete, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness like strobe lights. 2 floors above, Tasha heard the chaos and knew she was running out of time. The small office they'd locked her in had a cracked mirror on the wall. She slammed her shoulder into it, ignoring the fresh agony from her barely healed wounds. The glass shattered. She grabbed the largest shard, bracing it against her knee, and began sawing at the zip ties around her wrists. Blood slicked her hands as the sharp edge bit into her skin along with the plastic. She didn't care. The ties finally snapped. She was free. The office door was locked from the outside, but the air vent near the ceiling was just barely large enough. Tasha climbed onto the desk, pried off the grate, and pulled herself into the narrow shaft. Every movement was torture, her injury screaming, but she crawled forward through the darkness, following the sound of gunfire. The vent opened into an industrial kitchen, abandoned and rusted. Tasha dropped down, landing hard, and peered through the doorway into the main warehouse floor. Kai was pinned behind cover, surrounded, bleeding from a wound in his side. Zhang Wei's men were closing in like wolves circling wounded prey. Minjun stood safely back, watching with satisfaction. Tasha's eyes swept the kitchen. Old stoves. Gas lines running along the walls. Pilot lights that probably hadn't been maintained in years. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Sometimes the only way out is through, baby girl. Even if it burns. She moved fast. Twisted every gas valve she could find, the hissing growing louder as invisible death filled the air. She grabbed a rusted lighter from a drawer, her hands shaking, and positioned herself near the doorway. "Kai," she screamed. "Get down. Now." He looked up, saw her, understood instantly. He dropped flat behind the pillar. Tasha flicked the lighter and threw it into the gas-filled kitchen. The explosion was biblical. Fire and force erupted outward, consuming everything in its path. Zhang Wei didn't even have time to scream. His men were thrown like rag dolls, their bodies engulfed in flames. The concussive wave knocked Tasha backward, but she was already moving, already running toward Kai through the smoke and chaos. She'd saved him twice now. She'd do it 1,000 times more. Through the smoke and flames, Tasha saw him trying to run. Minjun, limping toward the back exit, his suit torn and bloodied, but still alive. Still escaping. Not this time. She found a gun near one of the fallen men, the metal still warm. Her hands were steady as she raised it, sighted down the barrel, and fired twice. The first bullet hit his left leg. The second shattered his right knee. Minjun went down screaming, clutching his ruined legs as Kai's men swarmed in to secure him. Kai appeared beside her, smoke-stained and bleeding but alive. He took the gun gently from her shaking hands and pulled her against his chest. "It's over," he whispered into her hair. "It's over." 8 months later, winter had softened into early spring. Minjun had been stripped of everything: his money, his status, his connections. Kai had exiled him permanently, sending him to a forgotten corner of the world where his name meant nothing and his ambition could rot in obscurity. "Worse than death," Kai had said. "Living with the knowledge that you failed." Grandmother May sat in Tasha's old apartment, the one that was now fully paid for, looking healthier than she had in years. The dialysis was working. Her name had moved up the transplant list. She had full medical coverage for life, courtesy of a benefactor she knew better than to question too closely. "You look beautiful, baby girl," May said, adjusting the collar of Tasha's dress. "Like a queen." Tasha smiled, thinking about how far she'd come from the invisible waitress with torn shoes and empty pockets. Kai was waiting for her at Elegance. He'd bought the restaurant 6 months ago and renovated it completely, though he'd kept the same booth in the corner. The same table where she used to refill his water glass and wonder about the dangerous man who tipped too generously. He stood when she entered, impossibly handsome in a black suit, his eyes warm in a way they never were for anyone else. The restaurant was empty except for them, candles flickering on every table. "This is where it started," he said as she approached. "Where a waitress I didn't know threw herself in front of bullets meant for me. Where everything changed." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that caught the candlelight and threw rainbows across the white tablecloth. "Tasha Williams, you saved my life twice. You showed me what it means to be truly brave. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of that sacrifice?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, as he slid the ring onto her finger, as he stood and kissed her like she was the air he needed to breathe. 1 year later, they married in a private ceremony. Tasha Park, no longer a waitress, no longer invisible, stood beside her husband as an equal partner in everything he built. She was respected. She was feared when necessary. She was finally completely seen. And when people asked how they met, she always smiled and said the same thing. "I saved his life. Then he saved mine right back."